2018. He has just launched the new English version of Monkey, whose first issue we're celebrating in this virtual launch. Our second speaker today is Roland Kelts. He is a half Japanese Tokyo-based writer, editor, and scholar, author of Japan America, How Japanese Pop Culture Has Invaded the US. He was a 2017 Nieman Fellow at Harvard University and teaches in the Culture, Media, and Society Department of Waseda University. He is a contributing editor of Monkey and Monkey Business. Our third speaker for today is Hiromi Ito, and she is one of the most important female voices in contemporary Japanese poetry. English translations of her work include Killing Kanoko, selected poems by Hiromi Ito, and also Wild Grass on the Riverbank, both translated by Jeffrey Engels. Excerpts of her novels are featured in Monkey 1, as well as Monkey Business, Volumes 5, 6, and 7. And last but definitely not least, we have Satoshi Kitamura. He was born in Tokyo and started his career as a commercial illustrator in 1975. He moved to London in 1979 and illustrated his first picture book, Angry Arthur, with text by Hyawen Oram, and the book won the Mother Goose Award in 1983. He lived and worked in London from 1989 to 2009 and now lives in Kobe. His latest book, The Smile Shop, is published by Scallywag Press. Welcome, everyone. So to kick off the discussion on Japan seen through the eyes of Monkey, I would like to invite the first speaker to share, and that would be Moto. Moto, the time and floor is yours.
Thank you very much for a wonderful introduction. My name is Moto, and I'm one of the 3 editors of the Monkey magazine. I live in Tokyo, and the other two editors, one, Meg Taylor, lives in Pittsburgh, and the other one, Ted Goosen, lives in Toronto, and we work together. Okay, first, take a look at this. They look like twins, but they are not identical twins. Both are literary journals, but one is in Japanese and the other one is in English. The Japanese edition focuses both on Japanese literature and translated international literature. And the English edition focuses on contemporary Japanese fiction. And we are celebrating, we are launching this English edition this evening. There are a lot of things we can boast about with this journal. First of all, we publish translations of really new work in Japanese literature, so you can learn what is going on in the Japanese literary scene. And 2, we work with the very best translators working from Japanese to English, and we really work with them, go over the text line by line with them to improve the translation as much as possible. And 3, we also emphasize on the visual, so you can enjoy a kind of dialogue between the text and the visual. For instance, in this first issue, we have a graphic fiction by Satoshi Kitamura, who will be speaking later. Okay, but I think I have done enough bragging. And most importantly, the copies of this magazine will soon be on sale at the POST bookstore located in Pasar Santa, Jakarta. If I'm pronouncing it wrong, perhaps Measy can correct it later. Okay, let's hear what the other 3 people have to say. Okay, so can I? Is it okay if I go on?
Yes, please, Moto, please continue.
Okay, all right, Okay. I'm nearly done. So Roland, I give the microphone to you.
Thank you very much, Moto, and greetings, everyone. Thank you, Lily, for hosting this event as part of the Makassar International Writers Festival 2020. Thank you, Measy, for the lovely introduction. Thank you also to Ita and Andy. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here with my friends from Monkey Business, Motoyuki Shibata, who's the founding editor, translator, scholar, author himself, also Hiromi Ito, whom I met some years ago in San Diego, I think, Hiromi, we met. She is a wonderful, energetic, thrilling writer, and also a terrific reader, as you'll see this evening, today. So it's a pleasure to be back with Hiromi again, at least on screen. And Satoshi Kitamura, who is also a dear friend of mine and a fantastic artist, an author, illustrator, storyteller, a theatrical storyteller, as you'll also see today. So we really have a real special group for a special reason, which is the launch of this brand new publication, Monkey, New Voices from Japan, New Writing from Japan. And of course, the title of this event is Japan Through the Eyes of a Monkey. So in a sense, Japan through the eyes of its artists, writers, storytellers, and even photographers. Moto showed you Kitamura-san's, Satoshi's work in the new issue. As you can see, it's full color, it's a visual storytelling. But the magazine also has some exquisite photography. I don't know how well you can see this, hold it up to the camera here, but there's some beautiful photographs in this publication, which has a whole section devoted to food. And as I'm sure many of you know, exploring another culture is often very much about exploring its food. We tend to appreciate a different culture from our own when we try the food from that culture. So this issue actually has a whole special section devoted to food, stories, poems, and photography devoted to food. I also want to mention, I'm particularly privileged to have a kind of personal relationship with the Makassar Writers Festival and with Jakarta, where I met Measy, actually. As Satoshi mentioned, he's wearing the t-shirt from the festival. We went to the festival in 2015 and gave presentations and performances. And that year, Satoshi and I, we were lucky because we were able to take a car up north of the city and view the extraordinary cave paintings. I can't remember the exact name of the area we went to, but Satoshi, you probably remember going up there, and we were able to visit the caves and see really historical hand paintings on the caves north of the city. So that was a very, very special experience. And again, I mentioned food. Trying the food of Indonesia was one of the joys of visiting in 2015. And I was lucky enough to go back the following year with another Monkey contributor, Aoko Matsuda, whose work you can read in the new issue. It's an amazing story she has in the new issue as well. And Aoko and I went to the festival in 2016. So we have a wonderful Monkey Makassar relationship that we've developed over the years. And I wish we could all be there this year, but this is the next best thing to join you on Zoom. So thank you very much for joining us today. And I'm really excited to pass the microphone and the camera, I think now, along to author and poet Hiromi Ito. Hiromi, I think you're on.
You're still on mute, Hiromi.
Yeah, okay.
There you go.
Fabulous.
Yeah, some kind of weird noise, and then could you please stop it?
Yeah,
Is it
so I would
possible?
like to remind everyone
You
to
know,
also
if she-
mute their microphone.
Yeah, we ask everybody to make a mute, and then if somebody is not mute, we kicked out. Okay, that's actually the best way. So everybody, please make it mute. Everybody, okay? Could you do that? Everybody's mute, and if not, then the host will kick you out. Okay, how about who's that? Cecilia? Are you okay? Anyway, I ask host to do that, okay? Okay, so let's start. What should I do first, Moto?
Well, okay, I'm on now. Actually, I was thinking Roland could start by asking you some questions about the your novel, The Sampler.
Okay.
We have published one chapter from that novel.
Yeah.
And well, before I do that, I apologize for not introducing Roland properly. Roland is our contributing editor, and which means whenever we don't know what to do, we go to him, and he knows what to do, or he knows somebody who does, which is just as good. And he's been helping us a lot with the monkey business, which is our sort of former life, and then with starting this new journal too. A person named Vianney Safran, could you turn off the microphone, please? Thank you. Roland?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you very much, Moto, for that kind introduction.
Okay.
So we're talking about The Thorn Puller in English, which is a novel by Hiromi. And as Moto mentioned, the first chapter is published in the new issue of Monkey. So the first question, Hiromi, I wanted to ask you, I mean, there's incredible intense violence in this passage. Yeah.
This passage.
This passage. Yeah. You know what I mean.
I know. Yeah.
I don't want to give anything away, but there's an incredible paragraph where the narrator says, American culture abhors physical violence above all else. It's okay if you use a gun and you shoot somebody, but you can't actually be, sort of physically violent in another way. I mean, it's a sort of incredible passage, and it reminded me a little bit of a very famous passage by an American writer called Nathaniel West. Actually, Moto and I have talked about this passage where he says that in America, violence is idiomatic. Like violence is just there in society. But he describes the fact that you have to do an extreme act of violence in American culture.
Yeah.
And I thought about that when I read your passage, because you describe, it's okay if you use a gun and shoot someone, but if you just bite somebody, which is what happens, that's not okay. And I
Not
wanted to
only
ask
that.
you.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to start, Hiromi, to ask you about that, because as we know, you have lived in America and experienced American culture. And I thought your observations about violence were really interesting. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. I never saw anything, somebody shot somebody. I was living in a very peaceful neighborhood and nothing happened. But then I noticed that nobody touched anybody. not how to say, in the school, like for example, teacher never touch the kids. They can't touch them. And then that's kind of weird for me, And then on the other hand, they're hugging each other, and then touching is much more stronger than Japan. We Japanese, we don't touch each other at all. So that's why, people said, our COVID rate is very low because we don't touch each other from first beginning. We just bow, So, but then I noticed that, so American culture, who is trying to be not violent, but then to do it too much. So it's kind of make a kind of distance from somebody to somebody. That's what I observed. And then, yeah.
Well, I in that passage, which I think you're going to be reading today, there's also a kind of reflection on, I don't know how to describe it, but kind of fighting with language.
Right.
In other words, the narrator describes the husband uses language in a way to be sarcastic or to be kind of a violence with language.
Right.
And I wonder if you could talk about that again as a writer who is bilingual, you go between Japanese and English, how language can be used kind of aggressively that way, and your experience.
When I went to America to live, I brought my kids, and then I just moved. I was 40 and already established as a poet. So my language was at that time, it's still now, just Japanese. And then I started to use English, my daily lives. And then Japanese language is, we use, Chinese character and the phonetic characters, and especially Chinese characters, they are rather visual. So if you're not surrounded by, the character every day, you are forgetting it. And as a writer, and especially I'm a poet, not just a story writing, I'm doing it. So it is very important for me to be surrounded by language all the time and listening it all the time. So my situation in San Diego, in the US, I didn't have that. So I was almost like feeling like suffocated every day. That was my choice to move there. And another thing is that there, nobody knew me. I was just a poor immigrant, middle-aged woman. And then that was rather nice. Nobody knew my work, and I could be myself. And I spent like years in that way. But then gradually getting so frustrated, nobody knew me. And then I'm expressing myself all the time in Japanese, but then I couldn't in English. I sound much softer in English, and I sound much more like yeah, normal women in English, I think. Or just, but in Japanese, I'm much more ferocious and I can't be myself. So that's another thing. And then my partner at that time, my story is based on my real experience. My partner, he died already, and he was a British man and who moved to California. So a very strong British accent, talks like a Jane Austen. And then I hate it, and then anytime when we had a quarrel, I couldn't stand on the same line, but I had to do that kind of stuff. And then, yeah, I don't want to recommend any poet to go foreign country to live. They got to stay in our country where our language there. Yeah.
That's a powerful statement. I'm curious, Hiromi, what has your experience been like now coming back to Japan, coming back to the language you were born with? You just described how powerful that is for a poet.
Yeah.
What is it like being back? Do you feel empowered again? Do you feel back in control?
Roland, I feel I'm suffocated. again.
Being
And
here
then,
again.
in Japan, because this culture is everybody has to do the same thing. And then I was suffocated in the US because I was immigrant. And then I was always thinking, when I'm going back to Japan, when? And it doesn't mean that I did want to do that, but then I was always thinking where I would die or something like that. Now I'm always every day thinking when I'm going back to the States. It's so weird. So the statement this time is you can't find the place you belong to. You can't. So that's what I feel now.
So let me ask you as a teacher, because you've also been teaching,
Right.
if you have a young a student who is a good poet in her language, maybe you read her work and you think, oh, she has some talent, she has some passion, would you advise your student not to go
Not to go,
overseas?
no. But no. I'm encouraging them to go overseas all the time, but not stay there forever. Come back, something like that. But then so many Japanese, especially now the COVID, they can't go out, so they are really, how do you call it? It's much more closed than American kids. I think American kids close as well, but then I really close. So I really want to encourage them to go out. So
Do you find I'm just curious about that observation you made. You find your students in Japan, you said, very closed in a certain way. Do you mean that they're not curious or they're afraid, or how are they closed?
My own kids, my own students are not. They're writing poetry, so they're much more open. But then other students, I've been teaching, 300 people's class or something. So they say they are really contented here, Japan. They don't find any need to go out. I'm okay here. I don't have to need. And also, some people said, I don't have to know things like happening all over the world, like Black Lives Matter or Trump's and that kind of stuff. I don't have to know it. I don't have to. And if you know our gender stuff or sexuality, the kind of stuff, that kind of stuff, they shake their mind. And then they said, if I know that, if I open my mind, then know it, then it's getting more difficult to live. I used to live much easier. Now I know stuff, gender stuff, sexuality, or things happening the other side of the world. They know. So it's very difficult to see something happening in Japan because they notice. So, only things I can say it, know it more, learn it, study it. And then it is very unease, maybe, but you can live as yourself. But then just a kind of, I'm just saying, but some kids are so stiff and they don't take my words. Some kids take it. Yeah.
I think we should make sure we have time for the reading. Moto, is this a good time to start the reading?
Yes.
Okay. I'll let you, Moto and Hiromi, take it away with the reading now.
Yeah, just a minute,
Okay.
just a wait. I can't. Oh, this, I can't find it. Let me see.
Okay.
No. I'm Moto first. Okay.
Yep.
I think you go first in the original Japanese.
Okay.
And I go in English. So we go paragraph by paragraph, right?
Okay. ちょっと待ってね。
はいはい。
2月24日。私は一人で日本に舞い戻りました。家を出てくる直前、夫に噛みついて、いや、書き 聞き間違いではありません。噛みついた、ガブリと人間のふりができなくなってしまって我ながら慌てました。そうして硬直した夫を置いて家を出て日本に来たものですから帰れるかどうかわかりません。
On February the 24th, I went back to Japan. This time I was alone. Just before I left, I bit my husband. Yes, you heard that right. I bit him. A big bite, too. It sort of scared me that I lost the ability to act like a normal human being. He freaked out when I left for Japan, and now I wasn't sure I'd ever see him again.
アイクを置いてきました。いざという時にはお金だけ銀行から動かして大切な本はよそに住む上の娘のところに送りつけ、あとは捨てて何もかも捨ててメモリだけ持ってアイクを学校の前で引っさらって飛行機に飛び乗ってと心の中で繰り返し拉致奪還を予習しておりました。
I left Aiko, a daughter of mine, behind. If worse came to worst, I could go to the bank and shift money between our accounts and send my most important books to my older daughter who lived elsewhere, and I could leave the rest behind. Yes, I could leave it all behind, bringing only a flash drive for my computer. I could kidnap Aiko in front of her school, put her on a plane, and take her with me. These thoughts passed through my mind over and over as I planned how to get her back.
顔を突き合わせずに電話で話しているうちに一時小康状態まで行ったのにやがてまた何が原因だったか口論になり、その畳みかけるような弁論大会の勝ち抜き合戦のようなものの言い方が嫌でたまらぬ。なぜそんなに攻撃的にものを言うかと私が言いますと、攻撃的と繰り返して夫は見なくても分かります。電話の向こうでくるりと目を天井に向けケッというようなため息をつき、お前は攻撃的ではないのか。この間お前が俺になしたことはあれは攻撃とは言わないのか。俺は未だに持っている歩くことの難しさを。
When my husband and I weren't face to face but talking on the phone, we'd sometimes settle down, but it wouldn't be long before we'd start arguing about God knows what. I absolutely hated the way he'd fire off arguments one after another like he was trying to win a debate, and I couldn't take it. When I asked him why he was speaking to me so aggressively, he repeated the word aggressive. Even though I couldn't see him on the other end of the line, I could tell he was rolling his eyes and letting out a contemptuous sigh. You're the aggressive one. If you don't think what you did to me the other day was aggressive, then I don't know what is. I'm still having trouble walking.
俺の股は青黒く腫れ上がり、まるで桃が一個めり込んで腐ってしまったようになっておるのだと。
He said, my thigh's black and blue. It's so swollen, it's like it's got a peach stuck in it, and the peach has started to rot.
それはとても悪すぎるね。とシンプルかつストレートに私が言い、実はそれしか表現方法を知らなかったためでありますが、夫には多分脳的でも3声に聞こえたのでしょう。医者に行った方がと提案しますと、夫は低いわざわざ聞き取らせないために努力しているような低い声で言いました。医者に何という妻がこれをやったと。この国でそんなことを所轄機関に知らせてみろ。それをしないで済まそうという俺の行為だ。感謝してもらいたい。
That's too bad, I said. A simple, straightforward answer without any ulterior motive. To be honest, that was the only way I knew to express what I was thinking in English. But I must have sounded nonchalant, perhaps even non-repentant. When I suggested he go to the doctor, he responded in a very, very low voice, so low it was hard to hear. Just what am I going to tell him? That my wife did that? Just try telling that to the authorities in this country. You ought to thank your lucky stars I'm keeping my mouth shut.
何が原因かと言われれば忘れました。夫婦の喧嘩なんてそんなものだ。そんなもので始まって別れる時もそれ以上のものにはなりません。最初の夫と別れた時もそんな風だったし、2人目もそうだったし、3人目も4人目もいつもつまらないことで始まって関係そのものが終わりました。しかしこの夫は湯冷ましのように生ぬるく、妥協もすればだんまりも決め込む日本の夫たちとは訳が違って、ユダヤ系英国人のインテリ文化に生まれて育ち、討論と労争に明け暮れ、言葉のダンベラの下をかいくぐり、私の2倍の年齢を生き抜いてきた夫であります。こちらの発するたどたどしい英語をいちいち箸でつまみ上げるようにつまみ、熱い天ぷら湯の中にじゅっと漬け込むような話し方をするのであります。じゅっと。
Why were we
Go ahead.
Why were we fighting? I don't really know. I'd already forgotten. That's how it is when couples fight. That's how things always begin. And when they split up, there's never any resolution. When I split up with my first husband, my second husband, and my third husband, and fourth too, it was always like that. Fights start over dumb things, but still end relationships. When a Japanese couple reaches some sort of compromise, even if the compromise is only lukewarm, like a kettle that has been left too long after it boils, the couple clams up and sticks it out. But my current husband was entirely different. He was British, Jewish, and had been raised in an intellectual environment. For him, debates were the stuff of everyday life. He made his way through the world, passing through the unsheathed blaze of language for twice as long as I've been alive. My English, by contrast, is faltering at best. During our fights, he picked me apart word by word. It was like he was picking up my poor English with chopsticks and dropping it into a sizzling hot vat of tempura oil.
じゅっと上げられ、私はエビのように縮こまる。
He'd deep fry and sizzle me. I'd curl up like a shrimp.
それなら一連卓上、私もこの攻撃的な話し方を体得しようと心がけ、この10年間読み書きはしなかったが、喧嘩英語に関しては我ながら感心するほどの進歩を遂げた。しかし、所詮文句があれば黙って相手を叩き切るか腹を切る文化から出てきた人間であります。叩き切るか腹を切る。なんとジョリーなと夫が聞いたら言うでありましょう。ジョリー、ジョリー、ジョリー。愉快な、楽しいという意味ですが、夫の口にかかればそれは浅ましい、救いがたいという意味に変化して、意味を変化させた夫はその価値観とともに一段高いところに立ったと上り詰めてこちらを見下ろすような気がいたします。口では叶いません。
In reality, our footing probably wasn't all that uneven. I'd made up my mind to master his style of aggressiveness. And even though I could still barely read and write English, I'd made such progress over the last 10 years in my English fighting abilities that even I was impressed. Still, I come from a culture where one either slashes at one's component without saying anything or commits harakiri. Slash at the opponent or commit harakiri. How jolly. That's probably what my husband would say if he'd heard me. Jolly. The word usually means pleasant, but in my husband's vocabulary, it meant something else. He used it sarcastically to mean shameful or incorrigible. When he said it, I felt like he was lifting himself up onto a higher plane than everyone else. No, I couldn't hold my own through words alone.
ギュッと上げられ、足元すくわれ、胴と倒され、追い詰められ、一斉射撃を浴びて、息も絶え絶え、いや、すべてメタファでございます。それを言うなら、桃もメタファ、棘もメタファ、夫も母も父も、夏の暑さも冬の寒さも、すべてこれメタファな、この日常メタファでないものは、私が私として生きているというこの一点しかないのでございます。
Deep fried and sizzling, scooped up by my feet, knocked down hard, driven into a corner, caught in a hail of bullets. I take my last breath. I say this all metaphorically, of course. The peach is a metaphor. The thorns are metaphors. My husband and mother and father are metaphors. The summer heat, winter cold are metaphors. Everything is a metaphor. The only thing that isn't a metaphor is me living as myself, and that's all I have to hold on to.
私は反撃いたしました。背
So
丈
I
は
fired
私の
back.
2倍。背丈は私の2倍、体重は私の3倍ある大男ですが、幸いおいてこの頃動きが鈍くなっておりました。身体的に他人を害することを良しとしない男だったのも幸いでした。手を出したのは私です。ネズミ捕りのヒーがものを言いました。相手は私の手を掴んで阻止しようとした。障害するなど考えもしなかった。そこにつけ入って青い硬い桃を差し当たってはピタリと狙いをつけずにやたらに投げつけたのであります。いえ、メタファです。桃は電気仕掛けみたいに床の上を転げ回ってぶつかり合いましてそれたのもありましたが、一つが夫の股にぐさりとめり込んだ。
He's a big man, twice as tall as me, and probably 3 times heavier. But fortunately for me, he was getting old and his movements slow. I was also lucky he wasn't the kind of guy who would inflict bodily harm. I'm the one that lashed out at him. My ability to catch rats barehanded served me well. He was about to grab my hand and stop me, but didn't intend to hurt me. I took the chance to start throwing hard, unripe peaches without even taking the time to aim, but I had trouble hitting him even though he was right in front of me. All of this is a metaphor, of course. The peaches rolled about on the floor, running into each other as if they had electric motors. Most missed, but one hit squarely and lodged in his thigh.
卑怯でした。飛び道具持たないでやるべきでした。
I was being unfair. I shouldn't have resorted to projectiles to get back at him.
しかしながらやらなきゃよかったと思っているかと聞かれればそうでもない。害したかったのは本心です。人を殴ってはいけないのは常識と思っておりました。それで噛んでみました。手段はどうあれ、攻撃したい、害したい気持ちを抑えられませんでした。髪型は腐って残り、せめてもの獣医が伝わりました。同時に私は圧倒的に不利な立場に立たされました。
But did I regret it? Not really. I wanted to hurt him. People shouldn't hit other people. That's just common sense. So I bit him. It didn't matter how, but for a moment, I couldn't resist the urge to attack and hurt him. When I saw the red bite marks swelling up on his arm, I knew he must feel how angry I was. At the same time, I recognized I'd done myself in.
ここの文化は身体的な暴力を何よりも嫌う文化であります。他人には指一本触れてもいけないのです。何を大嘘です。銃を取ったらいくらでも人を殺す文化です。殺してもいいが暴力を他人に与えてはいけない。Never, never 人々は考えている。All か Nothing か。人々は考えている。Never, never 殺さぬべきか殺してしまうべきかと人々は考えている。
American culture abhors physical violence above all else. You can't even lay a finger on a person. Actually, that's a huge lie. In America, you can take a gun and kill as many people as you want. People think it's okay to own a gun and shoot, but you mustn't inflict violence. Never, never, ever. It's all or nothing. You should never kill. But if you do it completely. Okay, that's it.
Thank you, Moto.
Thank you. Thank you.
はい。
The translation is by wonderful translator Jeffrey Angles.
Jeffrey Angles. Thank you, Jeffrey.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
Bravo, bravo. Thank you both for that wonderful reading. And as Moto mentioned, the translation into English by Jeffrey Angles, which is an amazing translation as well, both the original and the translation. Just wanted to ask you a quick question, Hiromi, before we move over to Satoshi Kitamura. I've read several of your works now, and often you refer to something being a metaphor. This is a metaphor. The peaches are a metaphor. The shrimp is a metaphor. Everything is a metaphor except me. I love that. And I wonder if you could just explain, do you feel like the narrator is using metaphors for distance to say, don't worry about it, it's not real. What
I
what's
don't know.
the
Metaphor is a metaphor. Actually, I don't mean it. I'm just saying, just something like that. You know, I'm me. That's it. I'm sorry.
great? No, it's
Yeah.
wonderful. I love it. All right, so we're going to have time for question and answer coming up to the after the performances, after the readings. I'm first of all, just quickly want to say that Motoyuki Shibata and Ted Goosen and Meg Taylor are the chief editors behind Monkey, and they do a great job. Not only with the publication and so on, but also, finding great translators, the best translators around to work between the two languages. And it's one of the gifts of the journal. So now I'd like to turn it over to Satoshi Kitamura. Satoshi is, as I mentioned earlier, author, illustrator, storyteller, performer. And I've been a fan of his work ever since Moto introduced me to Satoshi's work. Also, wanted to ask Satoshi, before you read, you also, of course, have lived, after being born and raised in Japan, overseas. You lived, in your case, in the United Kingdom for a number of years. And I just wanted to ask you a similar question about language. You actually produce original work in English, of course, but do you feel like you really gained a lot living in the English language culture for so many years and then coming back to Japan? Or do you feel like something was lost? Or do you feel like you prefer English now or prefer Japanese, or do you have no opinion whatsoever on that? I'm just curious.
I don't know. Well, I have to use English. I had to write in English because I started my career in England, and I like the language very much. But I'm still learning. I mean, I find it's difficult to write and communicate as well. But since I started, doing this thing, my work in England and in speaking English, I don't know. It's interesting to learn the foreign language and use it, and but I didn't. Well, I think I used to get a bit frustrated not being able to speak Japanese as much as I wanted to, but I don't know. I think I gained a lot from starting my career in English in England and in English, because it's sort of, once it's published in English language, it's easier to get translated into lots of other languages. So I got to know many other countries and got invited or got to know people in all sorts of places in the world. So I think it was very good for me. And I don't know, I really liked England a lot and the culture. But also I'm a bit frustrated by what's happening these days in England. And but I don't know. There's no question. I don't think I'm completely happy here, or I don't think I can be completely happy any place. I suppose I always feel like I'm a bit like a stranger in any place, but I don't mind it at all, because somehow whatever I do, my work has been seen by many people in many countries. So I'm quite happy. Yes. Okay.
I have a very fond memory of the audience reactions to your kamishibai, paper, theater, storytelling, performances, actually all over the world, but particularly in our visits to Indonesia. It seemed like it's just a wonderful response by the audience. Many of the audience members in Indonesia were quite young. Do you have the same memories of that experience?
Yes, I really enjoyed our stay in Indonesia. And yes, I do workshops a lot with children, about 9, 10 years old. And they are the kind of very interesting age group. They are most spontaneous. So it's I really enjoy, doing my kamishibai performance or doing workshop with them and drawing together with them and so on. So in a sense, doing this sort of performance to adults is slightly different. It's not difficult, perhaps, because it's probably more the children are more difficult customers to please in lots of time. But I really enjoy this opportunity, like this monkey, that I could do this comic story or graphic story like this, because I've been most of my career, I've been working for children, and I do enjoy occasionally doing something for adults. Yeah. So shall I show you whatever I show you? I mean, because I did this story, I did a kind of trailer, which I've shown you before, but this time for people in Indonesia, I'd like to show this one. Yes, come. Yeah. Monkey presents The Heart of the Lunchbox by Satoshi Kitamura. Trailer. Shota has a problem. His lunchbox is not as sumptuous as his classmates. It's too plain. Sometimes they tease him about it. But Shota can't ask his mom to make a lunchbox like theirs. She's far too busy. She works every day. After a walk in the park one Sunday, mother tells her son, "I'll make a special lunchbox for you for tomorrow. It will be so special, you'll remember it for the rest of your life." So when Shota opens his lunchbox, he opened the door to the world of the unknown, with full of mystery, adventure, discovery. Misery and danger. Don't miss it. now available at bookstores near you or in this homepage. Thank you. I'll show you another one. This one I've done last year. I showed it to a small audience in Japan. A second. Second. It's called A Sigh of Dragons. Dragon had an ambition. He wanted to be a king, have his own kingdom. So he decided to attack the castle near his home in the woods on the hill. He planned to kidnap the princess and return to the woods with her. Then he'd fight the soldiers who come to take back the princess. He was certain that he'd beat them easily because of the advantage of fighting on his home ground. After destroying the enemy's troops, he'd take the castle and the kingdom. What a marvelous idea. So he attacked the castle and brought the princess back to his den. He kept her in the cave in the rocky hill and waited for the army's arrival. And this is the cave and the princess. Dragon spent lots of time doing exercise to keep himself fit, but the enemy did not come. There was no sign of them. Meanwhile, the princess was bored. She carved chess pieces out of the rocks and told Dragon that she'd teach him the game of chess. Out of politeness, Dragon agreed. But once he learned how to play, he fell in love with the game. The princess and Dragon played chess from morning to night, day in, day out, week after week. He was thrilled to find a talented pupil in Dragon. As a matter of fact, she was not a princess at all. She was a mere servant at the castle. Dragon thought she was the princess because she was the prettiest. So this is the girl who Dragon thought the princess, but real princess is this. He didn't know that those richly dressed were the superior ones among humans. The girl happened to be a servant, but was also a champion chess player. As he played chess, something changed inside of Dragon. he lost interest in becoming a king or owning a kingdom. How silly of me to have such vulgar ambitions. Dragon was ashamed of himself. All he wanted now was to be good at chess. At the same time, he found himself being in love with the princess. When I become as good as she is, one day, I'll tell her my feelings, thought the dragon to himself, and sighed a deep, inflammable sigh. The servant girl had a fiancé who was devastated by her disappearance and made a huge effort to find out her whereabouts. Now he came very near to the dragon's den. That day, they are playing a close game. Both dragon and the girl were staring at the chessboard without a slightest stir. Suddenly, a young man dashed out of the bush with a spear in his hands. The girl called out his name. Hearing her cry, Dragon understood everything, what the young man was to her, and he did nothing. He stayed still. The spear went through his body, and Dragon fell off the cliff. When they are leaving Dragon's den, the girl glanced at the chessboard once again and saw that she had lost the game. Okay, thank you.
Wonderful.
Thanks. And actually, Roland mentioned about the cave in Indonesia. I was really impressed by it, and I was lucky that I could see it. It's one of the oldest caves in the history. And I have this cave story as well. Second. Very simple, just a second. Yeah, I don't need this one. Okay. Oh, just a second. I went the wrong way. Yeah, this is the right direction. There's a man walking in the woods alone. Suddenly, the rain started, it became very windy. So he started to run, to look for somewhere to a shelter. So he found a cave. He went in. As he walked in the cave, he found something very interesting. There are paintings on the wall. There are lots of animals. And then the paintings started to move. These animals started to walk. And the animals were running and disappearing. And then came back, but this time they are birds. Birds are also disappearing. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
That was just magical, Satoshi. Thank you so much.
Hi.
Yeah, I think this is maybe the 5th time I've ever seen this Kamishibai, but each time I see it, it gets more and more beautiful.
Thank you.
Um,
Okay. So I'm finished.
Before, I think we're going to move on to Q&A. So if you're watching now and you have some questions for the artists, editors, etc., looks like you can just post them in the chat on Zoom. Satoshi, I wanted to just quickly ask you, I think I mentioned Kamishibai a little earlier, but I'm not sure if everybody knows exactly what that is. I wonder if you could just give everybody a brief history, or not history, but just explain what Kamishibai
Yeah, it started as street entertainment for children, maybe nearly 100 years ago, I guess. And the man used to come to street corner to show these Kamishibai stories. To watch it, you have to buy sweets from him. And it went on for many years until about 1960s. I actually belong to the last generation who actually saw the real street Kamishibai. And the Kamishibai is just storytelling with sliding pictures, right? Pictures with sliding out from one after another from this box. And it's nowadays it's used in schools and libraries in primary schools. It's very popular. It's there are at least 2 publishers of Kamishibais in Japan. And yeah, so I use it when I do workshop with children. And also the first one I showed you as a trailer, which is based on this idea of that Japanese parents makes a quite an elaborate lunchbox for their children. And they have this, they spend hours just preparing this lunchbox for their children. And so that's a kind of the idea I got. But I had this idea for many years as children's story, but I somehow it didn't work as children's. And then this time when Moto asked me to write something for New Monkey, because the theme is about eating the food. So I tried this lunchbox story again, and somehow it worked. I don't know why, but partly because it's because I got this idea of I used to have this idea of family story, father, mother, son, going into this ancient world through lunchbox. But when I excluded father, somehow story worked. And so at last I've kind of finished this story. I think I had it for maybe 20 years or so. Yes, that's about it, about this story. Yep.
I'm going to ask Measy now to, I guess, open the Q&A on Zoom so that you can ask questions of Hiromi Ito or Satoshi Kitamura or Moto or me, if you wish. Satoshi, just quickly, what kind of things do you read nowadays? I'm wondering if you read manga or if you read storybooks.
I haven't read manga or comics much these days. I don't know what I read. I read kind of popular science book. I like reading books about birds for some reason. I haven't read many novels lately. Because of this year, I had an exhibition and I was quite busy just working on pictures. So I haven't read as much as I wanted to. Yeah. But the comics, I used to read lots of early 20th century American comics, which I really like Little Nemo in Wonderland or Crazy Cat and so on. That Moto translated.
Yeah.
Yes.
Perhaps we can ask the same question to Hiromi. What are you reading these days?
What are you reading?
Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Hiromi, what kind of things do you read these days?
My student writing. My student writing, my student novel, my student poetry, and then also, I've been reading lots of manga after I came back. Actually, when I was there in America, we started to could get the manga online.
Yep.
So I could started buy it, I could buy it a lot. And then now, manga all over in Japan. So it's so amazing. So that's all I read. And literature, of course, I like classical literatures. And then, whatever, Zebald. Do you know? Recently I read a lot. And then, it's a Japanese writer. It's called Goto Meisei. I like now. Yeah, that kind of stuff.
Do you enjoy reading students' writings?
Yes and no. I really enjoyed poetry more. But then I don't like short stories. I don't know why. Maybe I know why, because they try to write a novel or they try to write a short story. Has a kind of pattern, and I don't like that kind of frame. This is fiction. And then novel poems, it's easier to access. And then even if really bad poet, I can tell why she or he wrote it, and then how to improve it. So I enjoy poetry more.
So probably it's easier to be yourself when you write poetry rather than fiction.
Yeah, because I've been living in the poetry world more. So also, easier to write, I think, without knowing any other poems. So I said, don't read anything, no poetry, no poems, don't read. And then just write, that's easier for them to do something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, I think I'll turn it over to Measy and let her host.
Thanks, Roland, and thank you so much, Moto, Roland, Hiromi, and also Satoshi for the brilliant reading and also the very interesting conversation. I would like to invite all participants to write down their questions in the chat box, and the 3 most interesting questions in the end are going to get Monkey in print, in flesh and blood for you to enjoy. So that's another reason why you should ask interesting questions, although I'm sure you already have a lot. And to kick it off, I would love to ask a question for myself, actually, if you don't mind. So my first question goes to Hiromi. You mentioned in your Q&A with Roland that you say that in Japanese, you're much more ferocious, and in English, you feel like you're more like a normal woman. So I'm just wondering, what's the process of translating your work like? Because your English is also immaculate, and you definitely know English very well as well. So I'm just wondering, how do you navigate the relationship with your translator when it comes to translating your work to make sure that your ferocity remains when the story is translated into English?
Yeah, I don't read. I'm a kind of illiterate on English. I'm just speaking. So, even if Jeffrey did it and send it to me, I'm just reading that, kind of, not really precisely. But when he did Wild Grass on the riverbank, I wrote it after I started to live in California. So actually, I wanted to write in English, but I couldn't. So when I saw it, I thought, this is what I really wanted to say. So English version is actually my real kind of word. So I think Jeffrey Angle's translation on the Wild Grass on the riverbank is my original. And then my Japanese one is my Japanese version. That's what I think. And this one is new. So I'm still kind of struggling to read it. And this is almost the first time I read it, this chapter. And then, wow, that's how I could say, so everything is so amazing. I'm just surprised how he did it. Yeah, it's wonderful.
Okay, that's really interesting.
And we've been knowing each other, Jeffrey and I. So I think Jeffrey uses more, how to say, Jeffrey uses English, which I know.
Okay.
So he actually adapt, his language to me. Do you understand?
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. So he thinks about what you yourself would probably write when to tell your story in English.
Yeah.
Oh,
I
that's
wish I could write it. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Hiromi, for the answer.
You're welcome.
Have a lot of metaphors. So she's curious, why do most Japanese literature have a lot of metaphors? Yeah, so that's the question. And who would like to answer first? I think this is something that all of you can take turns answering. So perhaps Satoshi-san, would you like to start answering the question about the use of metaphors in your work, perhaps, or in Japanese literature?
Metaphors. That's too difficult for me. I don't know about. This is something like someone like Moto should answer. He's the academic. I am not. I think metaphor is too difficult word for me.
I translate American literature So I always, I'm always comparing Japan with the United States, and Japanese fiction with American fiction, and everyone can see that the American fiction is much more based on realism. Probably because in Japan, what we call reality, so much of it is made up of images, or hyper reality, or not actual real things, but images you see on television, or texts you read from newspaper and books and things like that. So Japanese fiction, especially contemporary fiction, tends to be less realistic than American fiction, and probably than fiction in many other countries. And when you write in a less realistic mode, you tend to rely on images, similes, metaphors. So probably that's the reason. I mean, that's one thing I can think of.
Mm.
I mean,
Yeah,
no
I
one
think
looks convinced.
It's-
What about you, Roland?
The question is about metaphors in Japanese.
Yeah, why
writing?
there is so much metaphor, in Japanese culture and literature.
Well, like Satoshi said, that's a huge question. I suppose I could theorize that if you take certain traditional Japanese forms of literary expression, such as haiku poetry, or tanka poetry, often, I know that in like Tales of Ise, for example, just to use one example, whenever there's an expression of love or strong emotion, it's usually a reference to the moon shining at night, or a branch, the outline of a branch or something. It's an image rather than direct expression of emotion. Certainly that's not only true of Japanese language, but it's something that I can think of where, again, like a haiku, traditional form of haiku poetry, you usually just get the images and a reference to a season without a direct expression of, for example, love or hatred or sadness. It's more expressed through imagery. So that's one, just off the top of my head, theory about metaphor in Japanese literature. I don't know if that makes any sense to
Yeah,
anyone.
I agree
think so.
completely.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. In the haiku poetry, and this is totally different from my poetry. My poetry is a contemporary poetry, which is how do you call it? It's a long and shapeless and
free verse.
Yeah. And then, but I heard that in the haiku people, haiku is very short, and then they have two things, kind of almost like a crush in the two different things crush and
Combined.
not combined, it's just crush, and then make kind of image. And then that's something like we inherited from haiku poems, and then that is a kind of poetry scene. But then I think the Japanese whole culture has that kind of idea, like a two different stuff crashing, and then make some word. And I agree with Roland, and I really agree with you, Moto. So that's I could say. And somehow we really don't like realistic writing, isn't it? Now. We don't like realistic writing, so I don't know why.
I can, I can give a very personal answer. You know, when I
Yeah.
was a kid, I was at school, I was in the
Yeah.
classroom, and most of the times I didn't know what's going on in the classroom. So I was always looking at the outside. I preferred, seeing the outside, rather than, being in the classroom. And, to me, the classroom is realism, and the outside is a metaphor. And I, like metaphor, a lot better than the classroom, which is realism.
Yeah. That's your case.
My
Yeah.
case.
Okay.
That's
Satoshi,
very
were you
interesting.
like that in
sorry.
school too? Were you always looking out the window?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure
But
he
when you talk
he
about
did.
metaphor is probably everything's metaphor, isn't it? The language is metaphor in a way. Because it's, I don't know, the language is a bit like, you sort of extract from the reality. It's not really totally, it's not equal to reality. It's our thought of reality. Yeah. So the other animals probably don't have languages because they don't need to. But we discovered language, then everything wrong started. Things became very difficult. So I kind of like reading books about animals because they are sort of free from language, I guess. Maybe they do have some sort of language, but I kind of bit envious to them. Because of this metaphor or whatever it's called, that something like language we have, it's a sort of it's useful, but it's a sort of the beginning of the troubles. I don't know, I'm too pessimistic.
Really intriguing answers. Thank you so much for sharing your answer to Sherry's question. So now I'm going to ask you the third question. This comes from Reindeer. So Reindeer said, I really like Japanese novels and Japanese culture. They're so interesting. So I want to ask all four of you, Kitamura-san, Hiromi-san, Moto-san, and Mr. Roland, whether you have a favorite author from Japan or maybe not a non-Japanese author as well, and what makes you like them. So who are your favorite authors and why are they your favorites?
It is in Japanese also, in Japanese literature.
I think it would be great if you can name one Japanese author and also one non-Japanese author, perhaps. Yeah,
Mori
Hiromi?
Ogai. Mori Ogai.
Okay.
Yeah, and then I don't know how much he's well known. Moto.
In Indonesia, you mean?
Indonesia or
in
in other world.
I don't think he's that known. I don't think he's famous at all.
But
Okay.
actually in Indonesia, there's an independent publisher that just released one of Mori Ogai's books in Bahasa Indonesia this year.
Wow.
So I
Really?
think, so
Oh,
I think his work will probably be more known. Yeah, as
yeah,
time goes
Mori
by.
Ogai is my not only favorite, my love. You know.
Okay.
Oh
That's
yeah.
why.
I've been living with him. No. I never lived with him. But then, if I were in the same time as Morioga, I would be his lover because he loves
Yes.
that kind of women, and then that's what I believe. And then I've been reading, and I really wants to write like that kind of. Yeah, first of all, the style, the language is so beautiful, so stylish. And
Yeah.
then it's something kind of echoed because I'm much too fascinated about that. But anyway, Mori Ogai.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you're curious about the Mori Ogai book that's translated into Indonesian, Andre just showed us the cover. So can you see Andre's screen? So the title in Indonesian, if we translate it into English, it means Wild Swan. And the publisher behind this is Eka Kurniawan's Independent Publishing, one of the well-known authors from Indonesia. So yes, that's the book. Post Bookshop also has them, and we hope more people in Indonesia will be able to also discover the wonders of Mori Ogai.
Waltz one is my least favorite one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which one would you recommend?
I love.
We'll
I
take
love.
notes. Which one?
Okay. Abe Kran. Abe Kran. A kind of tragedy happened on the family of Abe, or Shibue Chusa. It's a man's name, and then old men and old women.
Okay.
And
Alright.
then is there any there? And I don't like the dancing. A dancer. That kind of title. If you have. That's also my least favorite one, but the very famous one.
Okay, we'll take notes then for the next book from Mori Ogai that Indonesian audience should be checking out. Thank you so much, Hiromi. Who else would like to answer next question about your favorite author? Satoshi, would you like to go ahead?
It's difficult. I haven't read many books lately, but maybe this poet called Junzaburo, Nishiwaki Junzaburo. I studied it when in my teens. I probably read all of his poems, and I haven't read him recently, but love to read him again. So in that sense, maybe he's my favorite poet. Can't think of a novelist, or maybe I like Natsume Soseki, but can't think of many. I'm not so well read in the first place.
He is. You are.
No. No, sorry, I just can't think about a novelist. In my teens, I read lots of Inagaki Taruho, and but I haven't read him for maybe 20 years or so now. And I don't know. So yeah, Nishiwaki is probably my favorite, I think, because I really reading his poems is like listening to music. It's just a sort of sound is wonderful, and it's just like a walking. Now I can't explain it. I don't know if I can understand everything he writes, but it's a pleasure for me to read his writings. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, Satoshi. And what about you, Moto?
Okay, I like Natsume Soseki, I like Murakami Haruki, but I think my favorite novelist would be the man named Kita Morio. Morio is his first name. Kita is his family name. And his best novel is called Nireke no Hitobito. So it's like, the Nire family, the people from the Nire family. He was heavily influenced by Thomas Mann. And so, I don't, it's not because he was influenced by Thomas Mann that I like him, but his novels and also his essays are wonderful, and his writing is always characterized by his combination of humor and a bit of sentimentality. And I'm a sort of sucker with that kind of stuff. When the writer is humorous and a little bit sentimental, I always, fall in love with the author. And Kitamorio is very much like that, very self-deprecating humor. He makes fun of himself. He's very good that way, and a bit sentimental, but always good. So Morio Kita.
Morio Kita. We'll take notes. Thank you so much for the recommendation. And Roland, what about you? Who's your favorite author? Oh, we can't hear you.
Sorry, I was just going to say it's. I think it's always difficult to answer that question, favorite author, favorite musician, because I think we change and the books change and the music changes. But I would just mention a couple of transformative experiences I had when I was a teenager. It was the first time I read classic now Abe Kobo or Kobo Abe's Woman in the Dunes, which is the title in English. I read that when I was a teenager and I was just astonished. I really didn't even think about Japan. I just the story just grabbed me, and I think the character falling into a pit and losing his identity, his ID cards, his license, everything was quite striking to me as a teenager, that you could become nobody if you didn't have your ID card on you. And then the other writer, when I was in my 20s, I read Kenji Nakagami. And every time I read Nakagami's work, I'm just sort of startled by how energetic and fresh it feels to me. So, I mean, there are plenty of writers I could mention, but those are two that come to mind that really sort of jolted me when I read them.
Thank you so much, Roland. Okay, so I think we have time for maybe one or two more questions. So by far, some of the most popular questions here are about Kamishibai. So I'm going to ask two questions related to Kamishibai. The first one is from David Farah. And he said that Kamishibai reminded me of the shadow puppet performances in Indonesia. I wonder if the two traditions have an origin in common. And yeah, this is a question whether you know whether there's a shared origin. And secondly, a question from Valentina. This is her first time seeing Kamishibai, and she wonders how do we keep it authentic and yet popular in this digital age as an art form? Yeah.
Puppet theater is extremely interesting to me, but I don't know much about it. Probably one day. I don't really know any connection between puppet theater and Kamishibai. Kamishibai, as I said, it started in this like a street performance, and it's an interesting history, but I can't really tell you about it here now. But I don't know. Yeah, I don't really can't say much about Kamishibai and puppet theater. I love to do a puppet theater myself, but I don't know how to do it. It's a special shadow puppet theater. So I don't think I can really answer this question well.
Yeah. What about the second question, Satoshi, about how do we keep a storytelling form like Kamishibai alive and relevant and yet still authentic in the digital age?
I guess it's in the digital age. I think it's I kind of have a feeling when I do perform Kamishibai at schools, they really love it because they are so used to digital things and it's real. I mean, and it's also spontaneous because when I do Kamishibai in schools, I just make up, whatever I say at the spot. Because I used this text today because I can't get the reaction from people with Zoom. So I had to, if I'm doing it at school, if the children don't quite understand what I'm saying, I can repeat, I can just say add words and so on. And this kind of thing, it's up to people. I mean, if people, do this kind of thing, I mean, it is very popular to do readings, children's book readings at schools. I mean, reading by adults. So it is like a bit like a performance. It's a bit like that. So I think it is not, it is popular, that kind of live performance in this time of the digital age. So I'm not really worried or, it should, just some people could carry on doing it.
Thank you so much, Satoshi. Would anyone else like to add? For the question around Kamishibai. Yep, Hiromi, you're still on mute.
Kamishibai is quite actually, popular among the kids, isn't it, Satoshi?
Yeah, I think so. Because the schools
You're
use
right.
Kamishibai.
Yeah,
But
and nursery
the
school.
Yeah, the school Kamishibai has got story printed on the back. So teacher read the story and they slide the pictures out one by one. And that's published by publishers. And so in Japan, yeah, it is a very popular form. But earlier I was talking about the street performance Kamishibai, which used to be a business, a kind of business. Actually, some of these Japanese famous comic artists used to do Kamishibai pictures. But once when the Kamishibai business became, difficult, less popular, they switched to comics, like Mizuki Shigeru.
Thank you so much. That's really interesting to know that the art form is still very well and alive in elementary schools in Japan. So that's something very interesting to hear. The next question, which might be the last depending on time, is a question about translation. So this one is from Michelle, and she sees that there are some challenges to translate in translating some literary work, especially for cultural differences. So she said that she has seen some of the translators do direct translation, but other translators try to adapt the translation a little bit. So it's not a word by word kind of translation, but it adapts it a little bit with other culture. So Michelle is wondering, as writers, do you prefer your work to be translated directly the way you wrote it? Or do you allow some alterations so it will be easier for the new audience to read it? She really enjoyed the discussion so far and she wants to say thank you. But she's wondering what are your preferences around translation as authors?
Should I? Yeah, okay.
Sure.
Okay, and Jeffrey and I are talking about that a lot. And then Togenuki, this work, Thumpra, is now translated by Ilmera Kirchnerite in Germany. And we talked about that too. And then Ilmera is much more academic style. And she wants to translate directly everything accurate. And then she wants to add a lot of footnote. And then Jeffrey as well, I think. But when I was talking with Jeffrey, kind of casual situation, I said, why don't you do that in a much more kind of, let understand, American people could understand. Because, for example, this is a poem. I wrote like simmered daikon, dried simmered daikon. It's our kind of daily food, but then nobody knows that. So I said to Jeffrey, why don't you do that? Like green beans, and then people would understand. So Jeffrey said, no, then because you are Japanese writer, and if we write, green beans, it doesn't mean that the Japanese food. And also, people would notice that he made a mistake, even if I said, do it in that way. So it is very difficult to make a kind of, adapt, adjust into the culture. But then I don't want to, I don't know. I'm a Japanese writer. I wrote in Japanese. So I want readers to read whatever I did. But then also, most of the Japanese poetry is not in the bookstore. They are in the classroom, in Japanese department, Japanese language department or something. I don't want to cooped up in the small classroom. I wanna go out in the street and then kind of connect to the people. And to do that, I think that adjusted translation could be necessary. I don't know. Then I said, why don't you green beans? And then Jeffrey said no. And Ilmera said no, So maybe that's where I'm standing. How do you think, Moto?
Well, I think the translator's first duty is to give the sense of pleasure they get from the text when they read it. So and surprisingly often you manage to convey the sense of pleasure best by being so faithful to the
Really?
original text. Yes, but sometimes no. Sometimes you change a lot, but manage to give the sense of pleasure, most effectively. So it really depends. It's not a matter of to be literal, faithful, direct is always right or wrong. It's not that kind. There's no such clear distinction. So it always depends on what kind of text you're working on. And my sense is that with poetry, translators should change more.
Change more. Oh.
Yes. So I completely agree with you. By changing daikon into green beans, sometimes we can create the actual sense original readers get, in translation. So I used to be an academic too, but I wasn't a very good academic, so I don't really agree with Jeffrey and the German translator. But of course it depends, with the novels, with fiction, I can only speak about myself, but I always try being literal, being direct, being faithful. And if it doesn't work, I try changing it into something else. So that's my basic rule.
You did this is not the Japanese literature, but then you did Huckleberry Finn, Adventure of the That was wonderful. I mean, your translation. But then what kind of way, you did? Because it was so difficult, not really simple, straight English. But then how did you, it is very short time, so it's very difficult for you to.
Well, when I was translating Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, I wasn't really, reading the original text. I was sort of trying to listen to Huck talking.
Wow.
You see what I mean?
Jim as well.
And in my head, they weren't really, speaking English. They weren't exactly speaking Japanese either, but some kind of in-between language, they were speaking some kind of in-between language in my head. And I was sort of, not really translating, transcribing, I was sort of writing it down, if that makes sense.
How about like a food or things or history or something we don't know, but then they knew, and then all America knew, but we don't. And how did you do that?
Well, America used to be such a faraway country, but we have learned a lot more about the United States now. So so many stuff, so many things are familiar with Japanese readers. So I don't have that problem that often than if I were translating, for instance, Turkish literature or Egyptian literature. But sometimes I needed to use a note, and fortunately Japanese readers, so many of them like notes. Readers in English-speaking countries, they don't like notes. They don't want to be diverted. But Japanese readers are more willing to learn things from fiction, so they welcome notes. So we translators in Japan are lucky that way. I shouldn't talk too much.
You know, my German translator, Ilmera, said the same thing. German likes reading a footnote.
Oh, yes.
So
yeah.
when I was translated in that way, I felt, I was very faithfully faced by my translator. So we are holding hand and then facing each other. And then she was watching me, and that was wonderful. So footnote is, yeah, in some way. But, I was living in America, and then I know that the people don't like it. So they just pushed it in a classroom. That's why I feel it. I shouldn't talk too much. I'm so sorry.
That's a very interesting discussion. Thank you for the lively chat to answer that question. So we're almost running out of time, and soon I'm going to ask Andre and Lily to share who are the 3 top question askers that are lucky enough to win 1 copy of Monkey each. But while we wait for Lily and Andre to make up their mind, there's one final question that would go to Moto and Roland, and that is from Angelina Clara. She asked, why is it called Monkey? What's the relationship between monkey and literature? So tell us, why are you calling this journal Monkey?
That's
Okay. My former journal was called Monkey Business. The reason why I called it Monkey Business was, well, actually, I wanted to call my journal Story, because there used to be a wonderful literary journal in the United States simply called Story, and they discontinued back in the 1990s, or maybe in the early 21st century. And I wanted to sort of pay homage to that American magazine. But there was this Japanese women's magazine called Story, and they have the copyright to the title, so we couldn't. We found out that we couldn't use it, and I was talking to my editor over the phone, wondering, what new title we should have, and we had to decide in a few weeks, because the magazine was coming out soon, and I was looking at my CD shelves, and I was looking at all the titles of my CDs, and I saw one by Chuck Berry, and one of my favorite Chuck Berry songs is called Too Much Monkey Business. And I thought, why not monkey business? Because in Japan, literature is such a serious thing. There is so much serious business going on. So I thought, we could maybe add some monkey business to so much serious business. So we called themselves Monkey Business. Then we discontinued that magazine. And then I was trying to start a new one, and with a new publisher. And they had already a nature magazine called Coyote. And Coyote is a kind of dog. And in Japan, we have an expression called kenyen no naka, so dog-monkey relationship, which is a really bad relationship. If somebody's your enemy, it's kenyen no naka, dog-monkey relationship. So if they have a coyote, I thought it would be nice to have monkey. And visually, it's very fitting too, because coyote is 6 letters, C-O-Y-O-T-E, and monkey is 6 letters too. So they look very nice when they, they are seen side by side. So we decided to call themselves Monkey. Also because I did the Japanese Monkey Business magazine for 7 years. And the one thing I found out was that there is no business in literary business. So we simply took out business. That's it.
Thank you so much for sharing that story. It's really interesting. And it's intriguing to know that monkey has a brother or sister, coyote, as well. So yeah, that's really interesting to know. Thank you so much, Moto.
You're welcome.
Yeah, Andre and Lily, now I'm turning to you to share who are the 3 lucky winners of the Monkey magazine. Lily, you're still on mute.
Yeah. Thank you
There
so
you
much,
go.
Macy. What a wonderful conversations we had this this evening. So I would like to invite Andre to announce the top 3 questions, and then we have 3 copies of Monkey for each winner. Please, Andre.
Thank you. It was really interesting discussion. I want to choose some questions from choose some names. The first one is Sherry. She asked the first question about metaphor, and it looks like that she observes Japanese literature very well. So I think she deserves one of the books. And for the second one, I really enjoyed the discussion about translation. So it would be Michelle Anastasia. I'm a translator myself, and it was such an insight that I can hear from the translator and also from the author. And the third one, of course, about the explanation about monkey, it would be Angelina Clara. It was interesting to know where the name came from. Congratulations to you guys for the 3 people that wins the books. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andre. And I think that's all the time that we have for today. Before I hand over back to Lily, I would like to say thank you so much for the warm, interesting, and intriguing discussion. Thank you so much, Satoshi, Hiromi, Roland, and Moto. All the best for Monkey. Looking forward to bringing the books in Indonesia so more readers in Indonesia can access the Monkey magazine. And we're also looking forward to the next many volumes of Monkey magazine. So thank you so much for the conversation today. And thank you as well to our friends at Makassar International Writers Festival for having us and making this gathering this afternoon possible. So over to you now, Lily.
Okay, thank you, Macy. And excuse me, I would like to invite everyone to look at this an announcement. So we're going to close this event by announce this a joint literary initiatives. It's really I'm very thrilled. Yeah, personally, I'm very thrilled that is it possible for us from Makassar International Writers Festival to work with Post and also Haru to start this joint literary initiative into 2021. So before the 2020 ends, we already have this planned. The joint literary initiative called Reading the People of Asia, and in 2021 we are going to focus on Japan and South Korea. And of course, today's event is just the beginning of our friendship in literature, and we wish to read more new writings from Japan and also from other countries in Asia, because we believe that literature actually the right door that's available for everyone to know each other in this region. So thank you, everyone. And for the winners, could you please send us a message through our Instagram, send us direct message through Makassar Writers, give us your postal address, and we will arrange the to send the copies of Monkey to your address. Thank you. Stay safe, everyone.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for
Thank you.
thank you for joining
everyone.
us.
Take
Bye-bye.
care. Bye.
Bye-bye.
バイバイ。
Bye.
この間土曜日に、